Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the City Council meeting for Tuesday, March 18th. First on the agenda is a presentation on the Linn County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. That's a mouthful. Kim?
Yes,
Go ahead.
Good evening, Council. We have Megan Prescott here with us tonight. She's with ECI COG. She is very much instrumental in helping us pull together our Linn County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan update for the next 5 years. She'll kind of walk you through a summary of the work that was done between all of the jurisdictions to get us to this point. And then she'll talk a little bit about some of those things specific to the city of Marion and the importance of this hazard mitigation plan.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. As Kim said, I'm Megan Prestigard. I'm with the East Central Iowa Council of Governments. And I'm here to give an overview of the Linn County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. And this is the update for 2025 to 2030. So first, I just kind of wanted to go over the purpose of the hazard mitigation plan. The primary purpose is to identify hazards that impact a community and actions that minimize the negative impacts. Linn County has a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, which is required to apply for FEMA hazard mitigation assistance grant programs. And these plans must be updated every 5 years to maintain funding eligibility. The primary purpose of the hazard mitigation plan is to reduce loss of life and property by minimizing the impacts of disasters. This plan update involved a risk assessment in which hazards that could impact communities such as floods were identified, along with vulnerabilities specific to each community. It also included identification of critical facilities such as healthcare facilities and vulnerable populations such as long-term care facility residents. Then communities' current operations and resources were evaluated. And then after identifying risks, communities developed strategies to protect people and property from future disaster impacts. Marion developed an action plan to reduce the impacts of disasters. Hazard mitigation plans are separate department to mitigate risks, and they are separate from emergency response plans. This is just a list of all the jurisdictions that participated in this plan update. So it was, and there were 5 new school districts this time that participated. And this is just a little bit more of an overview by the numbers of who participated in this plan. There were a total of 30 jurisdictions, the county, and then 18 cities and 11 school districts, and 35 planning meetings were held. Between June and October 2024. Most jurisdictions had 1 meeting, but Cedar Rapids and Linn County had more. It is just goes over the timeline. We kicked off the process in April of last year for the update. And then, like I said, planning meetings took place mostly over the summer, but a few went into the fall. Plan writing took place concurrently with the meetings. We submitted a draft in January to Iowa Homeland Security, and there was a 2-week public comment period. The initial review required some revisions, but were for clarity, and they didn't change the priorities and projects identified by your planning committee. Iowa has since approved our revisions, and it's now under review at FEMA. So the step we're at is the plan submittal and adoption stage. The plan must be adopted by a resolution. For each jurisdiction must do this. And like I said, it's being concurrently reviewed by FEMA, and ECOG is assisting all participating jurisdictions with the adoption process. And then we will submit all the resolutions to the state, who will then send them to FEMA. And that's kind of a brief overview. The updated plan is on our website, which is listed here. And I can answer any questions you have.
Questions for Megan? Go ahead.
So I appreciate the fact that the work that's been done to create this document has been completed. As some of you will know, I naturally took a look at the 500+ pages to understand what was contained in it. And I do have some questions about Marion specific planning, but I do want to just say, I think this is important planning if it interfaces into the local strategic plans. How soon will FEMA be giving feedback on what's has been or will be submitted?
Iowa Homeland Security told us their turnaround time is generally 45 days, but they weren't sure with the new administration what the timeline will be.
Right.
But it is out of Iowa's hands and now in FEMA's. So we're hopeful that they'll get back to us within 45 days, but I don't know.
Do you know, has prior reviews by FEMA been, I'll say rather constrained, or have they found major improvements that they'd like to see be made?
As far as I know, the revisions by FEMA haven't been substantial. That's why like Iowa Homeland Security reviews it first to have us, they wanted to help us fix things before it got to FEMA because they reviewed it to just go over the standards that FEMA will be looking at. So we're hopeful that FEMA won't have any major revisions.
So
Yeah.
we're being asked to adopt it before FEMA weighs in?
Yes, that's how the process usually works. They required us to have Lynn County approve it by resolution as part of the process. So Lynn County has already approved it by resolution, and then we are supposed to have all of the jurisdictions approve it by resolution while they're reviewing it concurrently, because generally none of the revisions they would make would be substantial to each jurisdiction's specific actions and mitigation strategies.
But do we need to approve it again with their revisions?
No, not unless it were, I assume if it was something substantial, but I do not believe that's ever happened in the past.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Kim, my questions that follow may be more for you. I looked at the Marion mitigation strategy, and I also looked at the prioritization list, not only for the city, but also the school districts. And I started just wondering, Chief Fagan, maybe you'll have insight on this. To what degree do these items that are specified in this plan manifest themselves in our strategic plan, our CIP? Because there's some pretty hefty things that are attendant to our mitigation strategy that I guess, how do we assimilate this planning basis into what we're doing strategically?
Yes, this is something that we do take a look at. It's actually one of the things that I first did when I came here 2.5 years ago, is to look, do we have these items? Because some of these are very similar to what we've had in the past 5 years plan. So one of those would be, as an example, were generators at city facilities. So you've seen our work towards the generators for the library. We have in this coming fiscal year the update for the city hall. One of those things that we'll have to do a little bit more work on is like Lau Park, if we want that to be able to be a place that we would want to have 24/7 if something were to happen. There's some limitations, just like here at City Hall. Homeland Security doesn't allow us to spend dollars for locations that are just purely operational. So like library, we're able to do a grant because it's open to the public at all time. So it's a little different perspective. We also, with the water department, we have joined in along with Fire Station 3 for an updated generator there. That we already have an application into Homeland Security, so now we're just waiting for those dollars to fill that bucket, because it was pretty much drained during some of the other disasters that happened. The stormwater master plan, that's another one. So as we go back and look at these and reflect, these are things that if we don't already have in our CIP, that then we'll strategize to when does that need to be in the CIP, or do we have to do a study to complete that, those types of things. So this is very much something that we have reflected on and will continue to reflect on.
Chief? You have something to
Yes,
add?
really just to follow up with what Kim shared. This document really works in concert with several other planning tools that we have. So the city strategic plan, where it identifies safe community as one of our strategic initiatives. And then further within the organization, even down at the departmental level, our community-driven strategic plan, in which we highlight several goals that we're working on. One specifically that ties into this and other hazard mitigation or community risk reduction strategies. One of the goals that we have within our department level strategic plan is community risk reduction. We actually hosted a National Fire Academy class here this past month on community risk reduction best practices. And our community risk assessment standards of cover study, which is underway, will identify even at a more granular level unique hazards and risks and threats within our community that we're going to continue to evaluate our operational capabilities and capacities against. And that also will further inform, based on actual data and response history, what we need to be doing to evolve to be as prepared as possible for the future. So this tool, along with our strategic planning documents, the community risk assessment standard of cover, really all complement each other, whether it's for grant applications, budgetary program and improvement options and requests that may come in the future, or even operational efficiencies that we look for as we move into the future as well.
Good, thanks.
Anyone else? You have anything else to add?
No, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. All right, the next item is the comprehensive plan. Nicole?
Yeah, we have Charlie Cowell here tonight with us from RDG Planning and Design. He's been kind of our right-hand person along with the rest of his team on kicking off our Marion 25 comp plan last year, and now we're kind of here at the finish line. Charlie.
Welcome, Charlie.
Yep, Charlie Cowell, RDG Planning and Design. Gonna take a handful of minutes today to overview some of the changes to the draft document that was posted in December for review, and then highlight the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission as well. Suppose I gotta move forward. There we go. So just a couple slides here as a quick reminder of our plan overview. It's hard to believe it's been over 12 months since we kicked this off. This is the overarching guide to policy in the city across land use, transportation, parks, facilities, and more. And that long-term vision for the future, as we've talked about with you throughout this process. Just a reminder of where we've been and how we got here. Kick this off with a number of different listening sessions, open houses, design studios, working with our visioning committee of community residents and stakeholders, really to get to where we're at today in this final document. So hard to synthesize all the input we received in a 100-page document, but hopefully I think we've captured that through our various reviews at the staff and joint meetings we've had with you. So reminder, big picture comprehensive plan. This does inform directly into the zoning and subdivision ordinances and any sub-area plans and design standards in the future as we move forward. We've already begun looking at some design standards for some of our corridors in a separate process. So we'll share that schedule here at the end of today where that stands moving forward. But today we are talking about the comprehensive plan itself. So 6 main categories or elements of the plan that are interwoven together throughout, and then our implementation section. So since December, there were a number of changes that you might have noticed in the updated draft that you received. Some of them are relatively minor, typos, grammar, clarifications, things like that. Others maybe were a little bit more content changes, and I want to highlight some of those today, although I would say most, if not all of them, are rather minor. Just throughout the plan, you'll notice some additional language related to these handful of bullet points here. Added a description for the urban reserve future land use designation, just to be more clear on what exactly that is, its purpose. Worked with some maps on the floodplain designations to make sure those are more clear on the future land use maps that was brought up in the joint meeting that we had in January. We did also clarify some of the open space requirements north and south of the airport to make sure that those areas are shown correctly. We did pare down some of the civic designations across the city just to fold in some of those smaller churches, places of worship into kind of normal zoning districts rather than really just focusing on the large civic destinations. And then a couple items here related to the mixed use density intensity descriptions, just making them more clear, as well as the business regional descriptions as well. And then we did add some more compatibility criteria for the industrial district as well, based on some comments. So that's kind of big picture, some land use updates that were made. As far as the future land use map, there was one, I'll call it significant change that was made. This came out of, well, one on the left there is the area for Tower Terrace Road and Alburnett Road growth area that we had landed on going out of our joint meeting with Planning and Zoning in January. Some new information and comments we received after that meeting on the direction of the state residential category in this area. We felt it necessary to update the map to make sure that we're reflecting that market potential in that area, rather than have to do an update to the map immediately after the plan is adopted. So on the right is the proposed edit, and this was recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission to make this change as well. And what you see here, see if this shows up, it does show up. So what you see here is the estate residential. Instead of hugging kind of the drainage area, here it shifts to the north and west of this growth area. This is immediately west of the existing kind of county subdivision out in this area, here on the north side. And then as well, shifts what was estate residential to expand the mixed use area up along the drainage way, and then revert back to low intensity for the remaining area here. And then the language in the plan is updated accordingly to reflect this as well. The road network and trail network remains the same. No changes there. It was just a change, recommended change to the land use designations for this growth area. So again, reminder, left-hand side is what was in the December, or excuse me, the current draft that's out there. What's on the right is what was recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting in February. So I'll stop here because I know there might be questions on this, and answer any questions before moving forward.
Sarah?
Maybe you're going to cover this, and I was in these meetings, so you can remind me. But as we made this change specifically on this slide, can you remind me if we ever had a conversation, and maybe this is a separate group, because all I see is a potential for a trail. Is there anything about a trail going up the creek? Up to where that neighborhood is. I know we have the trail system along Tower Terrace, and then we have the trail farther east on Irish Drive, but we've got that whole neighborhood. We've had lots of conversation about sidewalks, et cetera, on Alburnett Road or getting north there. So I was just curious if we had entertained that, or if that falls under somebody else's purview to think about how we'd have a.
Yeah, so there's a few trails shown here, and they're kind of small, but yeah, we have the Alburnett Road side path, Tower Terrace Road side path, and then this future collector here would also have a side path trail on it as well.
It would go all the way up?
Yep, it would follow
Okay.
that proposed road alignment. Yep.
Perfect.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Grant, go ahead.
Well, as I think back to what sort of catalyzed this whole effort, and certainly it was needed given the date of the original or the source document that has now been revised. Does this adequately define and guide efforts along Tower Terrace Road that are more acceptable to that area's development long-term versus what we endured that with the one commercial facility that stimulated the moratorium? Did we solve the headache?
Sure. Yeah, I will say, the vision portion, yes, and the comp plan talks, at length about gateways and, uses and intensity along corridors. And then the second part of implementing that is the design work, design standards work that's kind of going on concurrently with this. So shortly after, this week, then we'll be start to see zoning recommended zoning changes. So yes, it does, from the big picture vision and land use standpoint, and then the granular is coming shortly after. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Okay.
There's no more questions.
Well, we can come back if things
Yeah.
pop up as we move along. The rest of the slides here are going to be a lot of things that were talked about at the joint meeting that were made to that December draft. One being our central corridors map. These yellow gold areas are subject to change sites, meaning they're candidates for redevelopment or reuse if that were to come about. And we extended more of those, as we discussed, gold areas, pretty much the whole western side here was added in to those blocks. So that's really the only other change on the centers and corridors chapter. The mobility chapter, a couple small tweaks, but not much is different in this chapter than in December. The mobility map here is pretty much the same, except we updated the street network around the proposed aquatic center site to match better what was actually proposed there. Really more of an error than anything in that section. No major changes from the December draft on the neighborhoods section. We did clarify some more language to help identify outdoor funding sources for neighborhood programming. That may be already changing and so, since we drafted this based on what may or may not be available to target, but clarified that. A number of changes to the parks section, mainly from our joint meeting in January. One of those being added a east-west trail at the Willowwood Park to 10th Avenue section that is shown here. So that's that small drainage way stretch here that was added in. We made sure we clarified better about incorporating more variety in park and amenities in the southern portion of Marion. So we made that very clear that just because there's a number of green spots on the south end, that doesn't mean we have the variety of amenities that we might need in that area. So we clarified that to maintain our park level of service. Added a couple other narrative items here and then a map update, another trail on the south end here. We talked about in January to connect kind of an east-west connection here to the park space. And then we did add a strategy to look at completing a feasibility study on sports facilities in Marion, which is a new strategy that we didn't have in that December draft. That was based on feedback and comments. And then lastly, the facilities section, a handful of items here that were updated based on comments. A couple of those being looking at making sure we're clarifying the new public service buildings that will be needed in different growth areas, specifically Fourth Fire Station. Also clarify the strategy for the municipal airport. We know there's ongoing discussions on that. We were not sure if by the time this plan was adopted, we know the conclusion of that. So we just made it a little bit more open-ended to be able to adjust based on whatever the decision is on the airport. Other items here are pretty straightforward, just clarifying some things here and there, making sure our city facilities are held to the same standards as private development, which we talked about. And just some minor things in this section. And something that is completely new is some of the implementation section, but a lot of it's just repetitive from the plan, just summarizing all the implementation of different strategies into table formats, and adding some charts and graphics that explains who needs to be involved, types of funding sources to attack different strategies and move forward as different entities come forward or funding streams become available. So today or this week is comprehensive plan approval, hopefully, and then moving on shortly into zoning, design standard ordinance updates. We've already started working on drafts in February, kind of working with staff to compile an image library of what we want to see on these corridors as far as types of development, location, how they appear on the gateways and things like that. And right now we're currently drafting some ordinance updates to then implement those standards, particularly on the corridors you see here, plus not drawn here, Highway 100 as well. So you'll start to see that information shortly in phase one. And then we have a second phase that gets into a little bit more dealing with sign code updates and some other landscaping and operational standards as well, outside of just useless stuff. So.
Okay.
So with that, happy to answer any questions on the comprehensive plan itself, or we can, I can answer some questions on the design standards if you'd like to.
Good to be at this point. Go ahead.
Quick timeline question, and Kim, this one's probably for you. I forget where on the timeline after all this is when the commercial moratorium discussion comes back, and that's set to expire when again?
June.
Is it in June? Okay. Thank you. I couldn't remember if it was June or July.
All of these are kind of integrating everything all at the same time, from the moratorium and just taking that into taking the moratoriums that we've had on hold and doing those, breaking down into sections. We're gonna, in this particular one, we're next stage is to focus on those 100 Tower Terrace Road, 151, those areas, which also will then focus on the design standards for that area. And just for clarification, it's not that we don't have the design standards in place. We do. They're just the words. So some of the work we're going to do here, in addition to if there's any changes that we want to see happen, this is a really good time to make those changes in the design standards. But we're also going to produce a visual document. So when we have developers come in, or we're working with different individuals that are wanting to build a building or upgrade their building, we will not only have the words, but we'll actually have the visual, which will also show the setbacks to the area, the landscaping needs and desires, along with then what do these buildings need to have aesthetically? Do we want to see something has more brick and glass? How does it transition? So like on Highway 13 as an example, all of our entrances from 100, 151, those areas, do we have the areas that are right at those intersections that we're seeing something a little more, what do I want to say, with the brick and the glass and those types of things, and then it transitions out or transitions back. So that first so many feet along those roadways, this is the set of expectations. And then after that, then it transitions back to something that maybe isn't all brick or all glass or whatever that might be. So we'll get those perspectives as we go along the way with this as well. We will be hosting an open house in regards to the design standards. We'll get your input from the design standards as well. So we'll have something interactive, because I think that's the great part of the comprehensive plan, and having Charlie kind of lay out all the people who really worked on this comp plan, how many people were involved. And you think about the numbers of people that were in the focus groups, from the vision committee, and the open houses of those individuals that came along with staff and city council. So we're going to continue to work through that along the way, so we can get a wide perspective and a really good direction of where we need to go.
Just encourage us to reach really high, because we're not going to be doing this every day.
Yeah.
So this is our chance to really envision what the community is gonna look like 20 years from now. And so, just reach higher and go for the best standards. Sarah, go ahead.
Will, I know we have a sign, we have some restrictions on our signage. Will the design standard phase of this also take a look at community signage, or will it just be within this area or kind of throughout?
Yeah, it'll be, we will be looking at the sign code citywide for updates. One in particular being content neutrality, which we legally have to update citywide. So while we do that, we'll look at the whole sign code.
Can you explain what that is?
Basically, you can't regulate a sign if you have to read it to regulate it, basically. So you can't say there's no, of course, now I'm blanking on example, a bulletin board sign or a real estate sign is a good example. You can't say no real estate signs because in order to regulate a real estate sign, you have to know what it says. So we have to have a sign code that is content neutral to regulate. Yeah, there's ways to get around it where you can still regulate real estate signs. You just call it something different and call it yard signs or something else. So it's complicated, but you'll see when we.
It's more like materials and height and that
Right.
kind of stuff, not the
Exactly.
content of the sign itself.
Yes.
That's
And
what
like,
you're-
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so over the last several months, we had two projects that we put a pause to. First one up here on 7th Avenue, the second one out on Highway 13. So am I correct that as we get into the next phase, which will involve the zoning, that will bring clarity on those two projects on what would be allowable? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Looking forward to that.
Anyone else? Thanks for the update, Charlie. Thanks everyone for your work. And so this is on the Thursday agenda to be approved or hopefully approved. So, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Chief Kitzmiller, K-9 program. There you are.
Just Chief Kitzmiller for 2 seconds. Back when we did the budget meeting, Steve had asked about the K-9 program, said he wanted a presentation. So we've got Adam Paulson, one of our sergeants, one of our K-9 handlers, going to throw some statistics at you and some cute pictures and everything else, tell you all about it.
Hello.
Hi, so as Chief said, my name's Adam. I'm one of the current K-9 handlers at the police department. K-9 program for Marion was established in 1998, and since then we've had 9 dogs. All 9 dogs are dual purpose. So by dual purpose, we mean they all have 2 functions. They have a detection function, which is either narcotics or explosives, and they have a patrol function, which includes things such as apprehension, building searches, tracking, or evidence recovery. Current K-9s are Silas. I am Silas's handler. He is a 6-year-old Belgian Malinois. He is dual purpose and his detection purpose is explosives. And our second K-9 currently is K-9 Taj. He's a 3-year-old Belgian Malinois and he's dual purpose and narcotics. So the next few slides cover some stats going back to November of 2021. And that date is because that's when we switched tracking software to the current software that we use. And in that time frame, our stats are a little skewed. We had about a 6 to 9 month period where we had 1 handler who was injured, we had 1 dog that was injured, and we also had a dog retire in April of 2023. But you'll see that all of the graphs are broken down amongst the dog's 2 functions, detection and patrol. And it includes deployments, seizures, and arrest on the detection side. And then it includes deployments, people found, arrest, and then arrest with bites on the patrol side. And as you'll see that we have 0 arrests with bites in this time period. And in the history of the program, we only have 1 arrest that had a bite. So this is that same time frame, November 2021 through January of 25, again, broken down by detection and patrol. And this is broken down by dog, Silas, Kane, and Taj. And again, Kane retired in April of 2023. And then this is just a snapshot from April of 2024 through January of 25. when it was just Silas and Taj, when both were working and healthy during that time frame. Use of force. Canines are very important when it comes into the use of force and the de-escalation from the use of force. The peer presence of a canine is typically deterrence enough to gain compliance from most people. Again, as you'll see, we've had several arrests with the dogs over the years, and we've only had one bite actually occur out of that. Training, the canines and the handlers all go through a basic 4 to 5 week class. We go out, we get paired with the dog. During that time, we spend all day, every day with them during that time period. And then from that point on, 16 hours a month minimum we train, typically at least 1 to 2 dedicated days, and then any downtime we can find on shift to do things. Dogs are all recertified annually, so they're seen by a third party who comes in, analyzes our performance as well as the dogs, and make sure that they are good to go. We often train with other agencies in the area to try to get on the same page as them: Cedar Rapids, Lynn County, Hiawatha. Capabilities, again, narcotics or explosives are their 2 detection functions: apprehension, handler protection, building searches for people, tracking, and article searches or searching for evidence. This is a look at the budget going back to fiscal year 2022. As you can see, the budget can fluctuate pretty greatly year to year, and that a lot of times is dependent on how many dogs we currently have working at that time and if we have a new canine purchase that year. We have mutual aid agreements with all the surrounding agencies, CRPD, Lynn County, University of Iowa. Big part of what I do as explosives handler is go down to Kinnick pregame and sometimes on game days for football. We do a lot of Linn-Mar, Marion high school stuff, as well as presidents and presidential candidates during election years. Another big part of what we do is public engagement. We do a lot of public engagement with the dogs, National Night Out, Marion City Showcases coming up, a lot of tours with scout groups, school groups, and senior living communities. Does anybody have any questions?
Steve?
Yeah, a couple. How long is a career for a canine?
Ideally, they work till age 10.
Age 10. So if you're the handler for one of the canines, can that canine, how does that canine work, or does it ever work with another officer?
Nope, they are paired to their handler.
So that pairing does not change at all.
Correct. Like Taj changed handlers earlier last year. His
Okay.
handler retired, so we paired him with a new handler at that time. But otherwise, they're only paired to one handler.
So you
Given
can
time.
repair, but
can.
otherwise, if there's a handler, that canine stays with that dog.
Correct.
So I kind of read between the lines there. We have currently 2 canines, but we've had 3 at a time in the past. So is there plans for another one?
I think that is the ideal goal. We had 4 at one time.
We had 4 at one time, okay?
Yes, and then that dropped to 3 probably in 2018, and then it's been 3 ever since.
So is it a typical, do we try to keep a canine for each shift,
Ideally, yes.
ideally? Okay. All right, thanks.
Anyone else? Do you have a question?
No, but I might donate my German Shepherd to the city.
Maybe for training. Not to training.
Anyone else?
That's cool.
Okay, anything else to add?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the update. Appreciate it. Okay, next is Seth. Central Plaza, sculpture.
Shifts now.
Sculpture talk with Seth.
There you go.
Hello, this is going to be, we're seeking direction to move forward with the Central Plaza sculpture. So this is kind of a mock-up of a 3D rendering from the artist of the sculpture. What you're looking at is a mirrored stainless steel. This is marine grade. So there was a lot of questions that came from the last meeting in talking about kind of the maintenance level to be provided. And speaking with the artist, they were recommending an annual cleaning of it, really just running a hose with it being marine grade steel. There was little concerns from from harming the structure. From the glare, as you see, it mirrors its surroundings. A little concern from the artist from the glare. They did I did ask about if there was any coatings that we could provide to prolong they recommended not doing the coatings because it would diminish the glare. However, that is a strategy that if we start seeing issues from glares from the sun or things of that nature, that is a strategy to minimize those situations. But she really kind of looked at it from, it's very similar to the mirror look that you would get from an automobile of it. From this next picture, I have the 3D rendering of it. I have a silhouette of the police chief there to kind of provide that size comparison. This is an 11-foot structure. But this will sit on the north side, just north of the ice loop. And so obviously it's going to mirror the surroundings. So you'll get the winter, the lights, all the different colors, along with the summertime. You'll get a lot of the greens, the purples, the yellows that we get from the flower beds in the plaza. This was taken to Art Council and also ran through the committee. Both were overjoyed with the structure and recommending moving forward. So,
Questions for Seth? Go ahead, Steve, and then Grant.
Seth, are we going to have a plaque there somewhere near it that's going to talk about the artist, what it symbolizes?
Yeah, so we'll have it would categorize as a large ground mounted plaque.
Yeah.
And so we have the Chamber of Commerce that sponsored this. So we're going to give recognition to the name of the
Okay.
sculpture, a description, and then it will also have the sponsored by the Marion Chamber.
The reason I ask what it symbolizes, because if somebody will ask me that, I'm not sure how to answer that. So that's why I'm asking for the plaque to do that for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And based on timing and talking to the artist with the direction into production, we're looking at a June installation.
Okay, very good, thanks.
Okay. Gage?
Yeah, my question, and I remember seeing the rendering of the former sculpture that we were talking about before on the plaza, but will it be kind of like it is on the screen here where you'll be able to walk right up to it and there's no like space? I know you mentioned like the colors of the flowers. Will there be like some sort of landscape buffer, or is it like standalone and then
Yeah, so
landscaping?
it does live within the landscape. However, you can frame it, you can go right behind it, get pictures. I'm sure we'll start seeing people, because people have different behaviors, that if they start walking through the beds, we'll see that. We can adapt and provide like flagstone landscaping there. So that's the good thing with some of the landscaping that we do in-house, is we can adapt to those human behaviors.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's all the questions. You have the next one, or do you have something to add to this?
As long as, just to be clear, we're good with moving forward into production.
Anybody opposed to moving forward with production?
Nope.
I think
No.
there's your answer. Oh,
Yeah, the only change I would recommend is you're talking about adding some walking areas to get up to it later if human behavior dictates that.
Yeah.
Don't we already know the answer to that, Seth? People are gonna take pictures with this all the
Yep.
time, so I would just say, again,
Well-
my recommendation is just do it from the get-go so that you're in control of making that happen. So that's my suggestion.
All right.
okay. You have the next one?
I do. So this is a really discussion direction regarding updates and schedule of fees. We'll be bringing schedule of fees for changes in April. Typically, we do this in July, but we have some changes that will happen since most of our businesses during the summer. We have some of the changes happening within the season. So some of these changes are just going to be more. Some of just the wording within it. For the banner fees, we're looking at removing the location because we put banners throughout, not just City Square. The farmer's market is being changed from Tobby to Willowwood. We do have a fee change for, these are violations for weed complaints and snow complaints. We had a $35 administrative fee. We're increasing that to $125. This was based on comparison to city data, but also from a cost recovery model of every hand that it touches within our agency. For rentals and special events, we are adding verbiage in there, something within our past policies that we had for special events. We do allow for a fee reduction fee to nonprofits and also established events. And so we're just adding that verbiage. Typically, that discounted rate is up to 50%, which is why it's partnered as in past tense, because it's events that have been established within the community. We're also changing the wording for Lau Park. We were able to, removing the rental of just a single red and white oak room. Now you can just rent the oaks room. And if you want to separate it, you can, because they're renting one room, you're really taking up the next one. And then the last one was a change we made last year. We upped the amount for the safe room up to $500, and it really affected the demand that we saw, and so we're going to be decreasing it to 400. Still an increase from what we had it before, but this change should help with keeping the demand there and should reflect into the revenues this next fiscal year as an increase overall. Any questions?
Steve?
Yeah, Seth, what is going to be the rental rate for our new updated depot?
I will have to follow back up with that. We do have an established rate that we've discussed. We're not renting it. We won't establish that rental until we have the facility fully open. But I'll need to follow up on what that cost is.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, and you're coming upon that time for graduation parties, family reunions. And I'm telling people, I said, that's an ideal place to hold those kinds of gatherings, but so I'm not sure.
We do have a rate established. I just don't know it on the top of my head.
All right. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Seth? Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
Back to Nicole. The Uptown Parking Task Force.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Today we're here to talk about the formation of the Uptown Parking Implementation Task Force. And this all stems from our Uptown Parking Study that was adopted last May. So the task force, we're looking to have that created with the purpose to oversee the implementation of that Uptown Parking Study and the strategies within it towards the back of that document. The group will review the study, analyze. There's 16 strategies within the document within 3 categories. If you recall from back last year, that's implement now, implement as able, and implement as conditions merit. So as we look towards that objective within that purpose, the group will take those strategies, prioritize them based on feasibility and the impact that they have, minimal impact, high impact, that sort of thing, through the data-driven decisions. The task force will also work with city staff, various stakeholders, council as solutions to those specific strategies are developed. And as we work through them, we will bring them for council consideration for the ones with actionable recommendations. This group, we're looking at composing it of 7 members. 2 of them would be Uptown business owners, 1 being an Uptown resident. And then we've got 1 Marion Main Street staff member and then 3 city staff members. And that's to help provide a nice balance of technical perspectives as well as non-technical perspectives. As far as the goals of what this group is looking to do,
They'll achieve kind of the goals within that parking study by implementing the strategies. Like I said, there's 16 strategies laid out in the back of that plan. We're gonna ensure that we look at each strategy within their category, determined, again, data-driven. Is this an ongoing, is this something where we can look at, take some steps, make recommendations that might include a budgetary item? One of the strategies within that is wayfinding in Uptown. We all know that Amber had worked on a wayfinding strategy for the city. So we'd be looking at that and looking at whatever budget is put into the CIP and looking into potential phasing and what makes sense for that Uptown parking area. So that'd be one example that this task force would look at when going through those strategies, coming up with different solutions. We'd also work with, again, different stakeholders. When we look at one of the strategies being having employees not park in those prime parking spots. Potential stakeholders would be those Uptown businesses and trying to work with them, see where are their employees parking, talking with them on what makes sense for locations to have their employees park, coming up with those locations as a task force and working with those stakeholders and then helping promote those parking locations together and kind of not just city or the task force cheerleading that, but making sure those business owners are taking ownership as well through that process. And then the main thing, again, is just to promote economic vitality, livability through these strategies. I want to make sure that everyone's feeling like they're being heard and that it is something that's improving the parking situation in our Uptown area. As far as implementation goes, once the task force is created, we'll have them look at the parking study. Not all of the groups probably as familiar as the parking study as planning, just not being involved through that process. So we'll make sure everyone gets on the same page and understands what those strategies are. And then we'll take those and prioritize them. And the ones that have the actionable items, we will be bringing those back up to council for consideration, as well as regular updates for those items that might be just more of an ongoing item and not necessarily have kind of a true deadline. And that's just kind of keeping an eye on parking counts and that sort of thing. Just kind of looking at what this looks like being phased out in the next 1 to 4 weeks. We're looking at having this task force created. So if there's anyone that you might have in mind that would be good for an Uptown business owner, Uptown resident, let me know. We can get them on the list to be considered as part of the task force. We're looking, 1 to 4 weeks and hoping to have this task force kind of created in April. And then phase 2, task force will look at the strategies, prioritizing the different elements within the document, what makes sense to start with as more of an immediate strategy versus ones that would be more of a long-term. And then we'd look for more data collection and getting that stakeholder involvement if needed, and then bringing those actionable items to council. Questions?
Grant and engage.
Yeah, Nicole, the membership on the task force. Now I know this has to be focused to the Uptown area because that's really the focal point of where we perceive we have parking challenges. But I think there's one more membership type that maybe I'd recommend adding to this, and that is somebody who is a Marion resident at large. Because number one, Marion residents come into the Uptown and make use of it. And I think they would probably provide a valuable set of perspectives as somebody who maybe occasionally comes to the Uptown, but has experience with either events or the businesses that can help shape longer term solutions to any challenge that they might see. So I would recommend adding an at-large resident to this if it's possible.
Gage?
Yeah, first of all, I would actually second what Grant said there. I think it does bring just a different perspective compared to all these folks who are really entrenched in the Uptown it'd just be good to see that from the lens of someone who's not as day to day there all the time. I have a comment and then a question. I'm looking forward to seeing the work that comes out of this. I think I've said it before, when we first started talking about the parking study. I think Marion is in a unique position, and whether it's a parking perception problem or a parking problem or a soon-to-be parking problem, I think a lot of other communities would envy to have this type of problem because we have so many people in and out of our main street and uptown area every day of the week now with all of the businesses and the events. It's just a unique and honestly a positive issue in my mind to have in this community, but still one that we will have to figure out and take the time to make sure it doesn't become a larger issue. My question, I don't think it was answered at the beginning, but this being a task force, is it ongoing or is there an end date once this work is done and then it's done, or what does that look like after?
Yeah, I'd say it's semi-ongoing. Once the task force kind of goes through the strategies, makes those recommendations to those things that can have actionable items, or works through the ones that are maybe a little more minor, or designates ones that are just kind of ongoing for staff to be doing parking counts, that sort of thing. The idea would be at some point it would kind of dissolve, but we're probably looking at the phasing on the screen here. If you add up all the weeks on the high range, you hit a year. But it's hard to say 2-3 years potentially as well. Just really depends on how fast we can get things implemented or budget items, that sort of thing. But part of it will be laying out those strategies and for the future, those budget items that if need be. When looking at the strategies, one of them is metered parking. Well, that's not something we're going to implement in the next year, unless if council wants to. But that's something that would be kind of put on a list for the future. Again, it'd be the task force to kind of make those recommendation solutions, maybe kind of identify more trigger points to when to start looking at that. So it would kind of dissolve at some point. It's not a forever ongoing task force, but it'll be around for a little bit.
Yeah, I do think that we will see this task force evolve into something that's a little more strategic and not so much just, here and now, the actionable items that we know that we need to move forward with. It is something that we would, that we've, talked about is right now we have a TAC, we have our TAC committee. Is this something that morphs together? And what does that look like as we work through this process and as we continue to discover and find the strategies, especially when we're thinking about the new buildings that are multifamily housing, BM6, all of those different things. What is the old library location? All of those things that we'll be working on, hotel study. This is definitely going to evolve. And it'll be more, we'll think more strategically about these kind of things. And is it something that we can then create, conjoin potentially our TAC committee, those types of things. So more to come with this. We'll work through this and tackle this. And as we see how this is working and how we can improve, I think that you'll see something evolve out of this.
Thank you.
So will this task force have some decision-making ability outside of council? Like there are certain things they can decide and then other things are council, or?
The more decision-making would be more best practices.
Okay.
Maybe identifying city parking lots, areas to have business owners go to their employees and say, hey, we would really prefer if you start parking in this parking lot over on this block, that sort of thing. So they'd be more of a
Promoting
best
efficiency more
practice.
than
Yeah,
than
then,
actual changes.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Any true decisions will come before council.
Okay, and so Is there an action item for this
Not
now?
tonight.
This is just a presentation. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we just
Coming in
want to,
April.
yep, we want to make sure that you've kind of got the structure that we've put together. Take time to ask the committee members. Hopefully you have some recommendations you can.
And the council
Throw-
will approve that committee, the makeup of the committee? Okay.
Yep.
All right, Sarah has a question. Oh, Will does. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say that I'm glad to hear that your vision is for this to morph into more, because as the Uptown gets busier and busier, with more residents and more restaurants and whatnot, the parking issue in quotations is always gonna be there and is going to get worse. So having a committee in place or task force right now is gonna be essential for evolving what happens with parking in the Uptown. So I'm glad to hear that, because that was rather, when she said it was gonna dissolve in a year or two, I was not happy. to hear
It'll
that.
have a
So
different,
it-
it'll have a whole different perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I agree. I don't know if 7 is a good number. I feel like it might need more, especially if you're gonna have all this stuff that that you want to get implemented relatively quickly. Because you're gonna have, I mean, I understand 4 is a quorum, but people lead busy lives, and you're gonna have multiple people that aren't gonna be able to be at all these meetings, and a couple more would probably be good, especially I like the idea of someone from outside the Uptown.
Yeah, strategically, we just really looked at it as, when we think about project management, we actually just learned about this. Not that we didn't know this, but it was good for us to hear it. Is typically, a committee is 7 people plus or minus 2. So if you want to add, if you think we would add another at-large person, or whoever you think that might, we're certainly open to adding another individual.
I would put my name behind that, of adding a large person. I think it's a good
Okay.
idea. Having just that community perspective of people who use the Uptown, not just the ones who are, here. But then does that then necessitate another person so that you have 9 rather than 8?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Sarah.
And maybe it's 2, because I think about an area outside of, you have options for, I hear a lot from our seniors. Somebody of the senior population is representative in the community, with their concerns with, especially at event
Mobility,
parking.
yeah.
They don't have handicap accessibility, but just that deterrent from sometimes attending pieces. And if you do that, I think it just adds to then general outside of the area. I concur. I don't think you can have too much community engagement with the topic that has been on the agenda for so long and is such a conversation point at almost everything we attend. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree with that. Their comments about adding somebody, because we still get a lot of comments about the perception of there's not enough parking in the Uptown area. And we say, well, we just completed this parking study and it says we don't have a problem. Well, you got some differences right there that still need to be addressed. And I know you've got some heavy lifting to do here in the first 6 months. So the first 6 to 9 months, I think, is your heavy lifting time. So having a few extra people during that period of time, I think, is more critical than maybe you can shift down after that, because after that, then you're talking probably more strategic issues and things like that, and maybe the makeup can change. So having a few more people from the outside, I think, initially is important, because those are the people we hear from. And while the makeup of the group that's proposed is okay, if it's really concentrated for the Uptown individuals, they're the ones working there, or they have the businesses there, not the ones visiting and traveling. So an expansion of that is good. And I do believe that as we add 4 more buildings in the Uptown area and add all of this Uptown living in the next 2 years, that we're going to have to readdress or re-verify this parking study. Again, I was not the biggest believer that it was accurate, based upon what I see, what I think. I'm not the expert on it, but like a lot of other people, and I know we've got, I do believe, right, Nicole, we've got the capability to, if we add a building or do something else, that you can go in and update it and re-verify it.
Yeah, I've got the worksheet to implement the numbers for units, or if it's a commercial project, that type of commercial space and the parking numbers that could be generated up with that. And so with every project, we're putting those numbers in for the uptown to make sure that we're not getting into that kind of red category.
Yeah, so 2 years out, two to 2.5 years out, I think is a key time, because all these, we're gonna have, that project will be done. The lofts, Hoffs on 8th Avenue, all those will be completed. The uptown area will be impacted by that. And I think how we reassess things at that point is gonna be critical as well. So who's doing that, how we do that, may not need the entire committee to do all of that, but I think at that stage, we really need to take another hard look at how that true impact is affecting the uptown area.
And we appreciate that this is the reason why we bring, take these presentations, bring this to you with what we're thinking, what we're seeing, and getting your input. So we greatly appreciate that. So we'll add another person to at-large. Sounds like.
Okay,
Okay.
anyone else?
Thank you.
Anything else? Anything else, Nicole? Thank you. Okay, we have Gary. Amendments to the construction and building code.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here to discuss a little bit about our chapter 126 of the building code ordinance. Later in the regular agenda on Thursday, or the agenda on Thursday, there's going to be a resolution for setting a public hearing. I wanted to bring a couple items to your attention before we get to that point. For starters, we update the codes, the building codes every 3 years. We're off a little bit because of they changed the formatting of the books. We haven't been able to get them, so now we're finally getting to the point. So one of the things that we are asking to change is the maximum size of buildings that do not need building permits. Currently, it's 120 square feet. The code actually says 100. It says 200. We've always adopted it as 120. We feel that the inspectors and the staff do not feel that it's going to really affect any buildings. It will not affect the contractors for sure. Homeowners will be able to build a little bit bigger garden shed without having to get a permit. Zoning will still be, they still have to comply with the zoning, the setbacks and all that. So that's one of the things we're proposing to change. We're also looking at changing wind and snow loading. The wind currently is at 115 mile an hour. We want to move that down to 108 is what the actual code says we should be using for our area. I'm going to come back to these as well. Snow loading is currently at 30, and there's a code proposing to move it up to 36. Not sure that one's really going to make a lot of difference. It might impact the builders a little bit, but it shouldn't really affect a lot. One of the things that we're asking to do is we want to add structural plywood or structural board to a exterior of a building when they want to use strictly foam. So foam board is used for the extra insulation. They build with smaller wall with a 2x4 wall instead of a 2x6 wall. They put foam on the outside to get the extra R value that's required by the code, this is allowed by code. And it takes a lot of extra inspections on our part because we have to make sure that all the drywall is installed properly, the sheeting is all installed properly, the siding is all, and it's a little more work. So what we're asking to do is to add the structural board to the outside of a building if they're going to use the foam board as the insulation on the outside. And I'll get a little bit more into that here in a minute too. The other things that I thought that might stick out to you when you look at the ordinance changes, one of them is we're taking the smoke alarm additions out of our ordinance. The only reason we're doing that is because the International Residential Code has finally caught up with what we have. They actually, our wording is really, really similar. So we're going to delete our ordinance and we're just going to go right out of the International Code. So we don't have to. The other one that might catch your eye is a sprinkler requirement we're taking out of the ordinance. I have spoke with Fire Marshal Fluharty and Deputy Chief Hanson on these. They're both aware of the change and are supporting for it. So this one is taking, I don't know, probably 7 years ago, we put it into the code because the building code did not really read very well, and we wanted to have our apartments better, having the sprinkler systems in them. And it just, now the code is finally caught up with what Marion has had for 7 years. So we want to just eliminate that and go strictly off the code language. So that's really not going to change any of the way we look at them or the way we have our buildings protected. It's just a change that we're pulling out of our ordinance. So a couple of the decision points that I have is, one of them is the wind load. If you remember back in 2020, after derecho, the council asked me to maybe step up our game a little bit on our buildings. Wind load was one of the ways we did that. At the time, the wind load had changed from, or was at 115, and we changed it, or it changed to 109. Now we're at 108. And we kept it up there just because we thought that would help protect our buildings better. One of the things that we do, and that's in our ordinance, is we require a fastener that fastens the trusses to the walls. And with that fastener, it's my belief that we get the 115 anyway. And we're not going to take that out. We're going to leave that part of it in the code. So they either use a metal clip to fasten them, or they can use a structural screw that they run up through the wall and into the truss. It's standard practice. It works really well. The code actually requires that if you're over 300 pounds of uplift, we just have it for every truss that you put on, no matter what your uplift is. So that in my opinion is giving us the same amount of wind resistance. The other areas, the other metro jurisdictions are all going to move to the 108. They're at 109 right now, so they're going to all move down to the 108. We're just asking to be on the same page as what the rest of the jurisdictions are. Snow loading, there really isn't a lot of discussion on that, other than the local jurisdictions are all trying to get on the way it's figured. It could be different for different parts of Cedar Rapids because it's figured off of zip codes. Marion only has one zip code. We're only going to have one snow load. But the thing is that we want to try and be similar to the rest of the jurisdictions. So that may change in the future, but if it does, I will bring that back and we'll discuss it at that time. And then the other part of that is the other decision point we were looking for is on the structural sheeting on the outside. I know that I've had a builder come in and talk to me about it. He's not pleased with it. He said it's going to add cost, and it will. If he wants to build with the foam on the outside of his building, adding the structural board is probably going to cost him another, I don't know, $500, $1,000, maybe by the time he gets the labor to put it on. So there will be some discussion on that, I'm sure, during the public hearing. I invited him to come in and give you his viewpoints, and that way you guys can hear from his side as well. My feeling is that if he uses a foam board and his framers and his siders aren't really cognizant of what they're doing, and they happen to miss the stud, the foam is not going to hold a nail. What I don't want to have a 60 to 70 mile an hour wind whip through Marion, and all of a sudden the siding is laying on the ground because it didn't fasten to the side of the house. So that's my fear. Whether that happens or not, I guess we'll have to wait and see. We're just trying to prevent that from happening. So if you can give me some direction on those two items, that's really what I'd like to do, is go forward with this. This is what we're recommending and what our construction code review board is recommending. So.
Okay, questions for Gary? You have some? Randy, go ahead.
Thank you. Gary, I just want to say thank you for this. I am in total support of this. From my perspective, these foam foam wrapped homes, you know, this also proves a little bit of the integrity of what the longevity of these homes are going to look like in the future as well too. We've seen a lot where, you know, for those that aren't familiar with construction, you know, you'd have your 2x4, 2x6, and then you would put your sheeting on the outside, you wrap that, and we've now gone to siding. Siding is merely just a cosmetic look to it. It has no structural integrity to the building. So when you strip a few of these things away, you're essentially left with not a lot. You're also impacting the fire department for when you have a house that is in full engulfed and it's on fire. The foam is going to melt. It has, you know, the less integrity again to it. So I'm totally in support of this. One of the questions that I have as well too is, and I wasn't able to pull this out of there, but have we adopted or changed our code on 2x4 versus 2x6 on residential? Have we, are we still at 2x4 being acceptance, or have we moved forward to going to 2x6 mandatory?
You can still use, and this is kind of our anybody that builds with a 2x6 wall just uses the OSB sheeting on the structural sheeting on the outside. We have had some builders that build with 2x4 walls. They use the structural sheeting on the outside, and they use foam on, you know, a spray foam on the inside to get their insulation value. The way of putting the foam on the outside is another way to get their insulation value. It's just not as structurally good. So we feel that the 2x6, the 2x4 wall can be built structurally sound once you put a structural plywood on the outside. So to answer your question, no, we're still going to allow the 2x4 walls.
Okay, great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Steve? Engage. And then
Yeah,
Craig.
so Gary, so on the structural wood sheathing, if you're building a 2x6 wall, you're going to be using a, what, half-inch sheathing, right?
Yeah, half-inch sheeting is what's required.
Okay, so under this scenario here, can they go less than a half-inch? I mean, how are you defining in that situation? How are you defining the wood sheathing? I mean, they got some thinner stuff out there. There's 3/8, there's obviously half, but how are you defining it for purposes of this? And I'm assuming the only time we're talking about this is only on 2x4 walls.
Right.
Right?
That's correct. So, you know, that's a good point. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm going to need to change. I'm going to need to add a minimum size, because my feeling is the 7/16 is a real common size.
Right.
And that one, you can use that on roofs. They can use it on exterior buildings all the time. No, if they were going to go to a 3/8 or quarter, they're not going to get the structural. So thanks for bringing that up. I'll fix that for sure. In the ordinance, I'll put a minimum size on that.
Okay, so your intent would be to 7/16 minimum?
7/16 would be the minimum I would
Okay.
accept.
All right, thanks.
Gage?
I actually have a question on the first bullet point. Where did that change come from? Just modernizing like the code, or was there a specific instance, or do we just have a trend of people wanting to build bigger garden sheds that we don't want to deal with permits? Where'd that kind of desire come from?
Yeah, so that has actually been, 200 square foot has been in the International Residential Code for, I'm guessing since around 2020 or 2003. It's been in there a long time. We've always just amended it to 120 square foot because the building code also asks for 120 square foot. So we've just been matching them is what we've been doing. The change has come a lot since, because when you build a building that's 100 or 200 square feet or less, the odds that is going to blow anywhere is pretty slim. And the problem is we don't have a engineered way or a good prescriptive way in the code to tell us how to anchor that down. So if we ask for that 100 or that 200 square foot building, and the code doesn't tell us how to anchor it, we're just guessing how to anchor it down. Now, if you get over that, then the code really specifies how to fasten things to the ground. It's a good question though, because it's like they don't have to get a permit for that under 200 square foot. They are supposed to still build the building to code. the state code would require that.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have a really good answer
No,
for
that's
you.
okay.
but
I was just curious.
It's
if there was
just
like
always
a
been,
trend.
it's always been changed, and we just don't see that many buildings that are between 120 and 200 square feet. It's not gonna really impact what we do, so.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Great.
Gary, back to the foam board,
Mhm.
discussion. Isn't it true that there has over time been houses built in Marion, probably elsewhere, that the only sheathing material on the exterior of the house is foam board? So it would be, if you're going from outside in, it would be siding, foam board. Then you get to your 2x4s or 2x6, and then insulation on the interior.
Right.
Isn't it true?
That's correct.
Okay, so I did have somebody comment to me a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, about the fact that with a foam board exterior sheathing, all you would really need is a very sharp pocket knife, and you could gain access to that home. And so I guess just bringing that up, I appreciate what you're trying to do here. It just seems that the use of foam board for anything other than enhancing the R value of the wall, it doesn't really do anything else for you.
Yeah.
So I support this change.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. The other thing to think about is that my department also does code enforcement for dilapidated houses and junk and everything and debris in the yards and stuff. And if we have a house that the siding blows off, that means my department now has to go in and enforce them putting the siding back on, which we will gladly do, but it's just another step that we have to do that we probably shouldn't have to do. So.
You know,
Back in the late 90s.
okay.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to the agenda review for Thursday. The only item that's marked is on page 5, E3. Is there anything prior to E3 on page 5 that anyone would like to discuss? Okay, E3, hi.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Emily Houston. I'm the contract planner with the city for the time being. On Thursday, there will be the resolution approving the central quarter review regarding a facade alteration at 1150 7th Avenue, which is currently Marion Antiques. The applicant, Madsen Custom Homes, on behalf of the property owner, is looking to remove the awning that is currently on the front facade. And doing so will leave a void on the front of the building. And so, as you can see, this is what's currently there. It's in kind of rough condition, and replacing it with something similar would be more expensive than what they're looking to pay for right now. So they are proposing to add architectural steel siding along the front. As you can see, the neighboring business to the right has something similar going on. They've chosen black due to similar detailing and aesthetics in the surrounding buildings on the same street. The property is in the Uptown 1 zoning district, so it has gone through the Central Corridor Review process, meaning that it's been touched by the Historic Preservation Commission, Planning and Zoning, as well as the Uptown Design Committee already. P&Z has recommended it 6-0. Any questions?
Questions? It's pretty straightforward. Go ahead, Sarah.
I like the black, much better. I wish then there was a way, does the same person, is it a different building than right to the right? Even though they look like the same?
They do not.
The
The
different-
contractor is hoping to work with them to get that switched out, but
Yeah.
not at the moment.
Yeah, that would be nice if it was all in black, but.
Any questions? Any concerns? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anything anyone would like to discuss on the remainder of the agenda? Any questions? Okay, that brings us to closed session.
Mayor, I move to adjourn to closed session regarding real estate transactions as permitted under section 21.51J of the Code of Iowa.
Second?
Been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding real estate transactions as permitted under the Code of Iowa. May we have the council's statement, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. I reviewed the proposed subject matter for the closed session and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code, section 21.51J.
Okay, any discussion before we vote? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Miskman?
Yes.
Mayor Abou Osley?
Yes.
Ms. Menzer?
Yes.
Mr. Brandt?
Yes.
Mr. Sterned?
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. We are adjourned to closed session.